Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. Happy to welcome to the event space, Sean Elizabeth. Sean, how are you today?
Hello, I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
Doing absolutely wonderful. I am super excited to hear you talk today because I think you're talking about something that's maybe a first time for the event space here, which is living with chronic illness as a photographer. Some of us can relate to that. Some of us, I'm sure, would love to learn more about that. So I think it's a really interesting topic, and I'm excited and just want to say thank you again for coming on here and being open and willing to talk about it. So if anybody does have any questions that you want to get over to Sean, please feel free to do so. If you would like, and you're joining us here on Zoom, you can use the Q&A tab. Otherwise, if you're joining us here on Vimeo or Facebook, you can use the comment section. But I'll just say thanks again for being here and hand over the mic to you so you can take it away.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. And I'm just going to start my screen. So hopefully this will all work smoothly. So let's just go here and share. And fingers crossed, you guys will be able to see. Let's go. Okay.
Perfect.
Is that all good? Can you guys see? Brilliant. So hello, this talk today is basically all about living with chronic illness as a photographer. But there is something in here for everybody. So whether you have a loved one or a friend who may live with a chronic illness, or perhaps you're going through something yourself, especially since long COVID has kind of come along, then there'll be something in here to learn and to kind of take away. So please stick around. And if you have any questions, then we'll be able to do some questions at the end. So hello, as Scott mentioned, my name is Siân Elizabeth, and thank you so much to B&H Event Space for having me here and for having this talk. It's so important to kind of start raising awareness around chronic illness, and it's something that I feel isn't spoken about enough in the industry. So I'm just going to pop my glass on here so I can actually see what I'm reading. So basically, this photograph is probably one of the only nice photographs I have of myself. And probably like a lot of photographers, I absolutely hate being in front of the camera. So this photograph was taken by Mike Cabasi. And if you haven't heard of Mike Cabasi, he photographs TV series like NCIS, and he does movie stills. So I feel really honored to be able to use this one. So that's why I've kind of put this on here as a bit of a proud moment. So for anyone who would like to go and have a look at the kind of work that I do, please do go and check out my website. This is one of the landing pages for it. I primarily shoot beauty, fashion and portraits, but in my spare time, I also love to photograph. So my passion and career, photography, and hobby, also photography, probably like quite a lot of us out there. I like to photograph wildlife, travel, abstract, basically anything, everything and anything. But this is my professional website. So this talk is going to go through my own personal journey with chronic illness, and by no means is it a blanket representation. Everyone has their own individual journey, and chronic illness affects everyone in different ways. And even people with the same diagnosis can have different symptoms and affect everyone differently. So I'll be showing images of my work along with some behind the scenes footage from photo shoots and how adapting in this industry has opened up new opportunities, along with some tips with managing energy while still pursuing photography, whether that's as a hobby or a career. And this image here was from a beauty shoot created around Pantone of the year called Very Perry. And it was published in the Portrait Project magazine. And it's actually one of my favorites from the year. So I thought I'd just pop that in there. So life before chronic illness. So this is me just a little over 3 years ago now. And I was on a photography road trip in America, and I was just attending the Kelby One Photoshop World. And if you've heard of it, or if you haven't heard of it, go and check it out. It's an awful lot of fun. And this is in Vegas. And this was the last big trip that I did before I received my diagnosis. Now, the best thing about photography shows is meeting all of the different people there. Like, you just meet so many people, make so many new friends. And this group of people here, you may recognize some of the faces in here. a lot of them in there mean an awful lot to me. They've helped me throughout my photography career, and obviously met a few new faces in there too. And I really treasure, friendships that you make at these photography events. So at the time of that trip, I had already been suffering with pain for well over 2 years straight. So since around 2017, with no formal diagnosis. But I still had a fair bit of energy despite this. So of course, I kind of just continued to push on through and push past the pain. And that's exactly what I was doing here in a place called White Pockets in Arizona. As you can see, I was actually using my Manfrotto tripod as a walking aid, which I don't recommend because I ruined the feet, I damaged the feet and I've broken it. So I'm actually in the, I'm hunting for a new tripod at the moment, but one not to use as a walking aid. So whilst in America, I was on a mission to put together a fashion shoot in the desert and was recommended this really cool location called Nelson Ghost Town, not far outside of Las Vegas. Now, some of you may know it, some of you may have been there, but the whole place looked like a movie set. There's vintage cars, pianos, rickety old buildings. It's just a photographer's paradise. And yeah, just some more pictures here. And these are just straight out of the iPhone. There's no filters on there. This is just how it looks. And it's awesome. So, and here's me scouting locations where to photograph the model. And bearing in mind, I had never been here before, so I had to think quickly. So it was August, it was midday, and it was 45 degrees in the shade. I only had about 2 hours with the model, who I had never met before, in a place I'd only just set foot in, with the risk of rattlesnakes and jumping cactus, so no pressure. But I really loved this old vintage car, and the juxtaposition between that and the model's really bright yellow dress was just too good not to photograph. So I tried to shoot as fast as I could so that me and the model both stayed really comfortable because we were just getting so hot. But I was definitely suffering in the heat, probably a little bit more so than usual. But this is a final image and I absolutely love it. It's just vibrant and it's a little bit different. And yeah, I was pretty happy with the final images from this shoot. And then this one, the model decided to change into a blue dress. Her mum actually made these dresses, so it was really cool that we got to kind of shoot these on location. And we ventured around to see where we could kind of capture this lovely blue dress. And we found a moment in the shade because it was just too hot, but obviously we didn't have a lot of time, so we just had to keep shooting, keep going, and just see what images we could get. But it was all worth it for this final image, and I love this image. So I love how it all came together in the end, literally at the last minute, and under 2 hours as well. And I can't wait to head back to Vegas and hopefully with a bit more time and preparation to go back to this venue and to shoot some more. So as you can see from that trip, I was a really active individual. Things like time constraints wouldn't faze me. I could carry all of my own equipment, and we know how heavy photography equipment can be. The blazing heat couldn't even stop me doing a fashion shoot in the desert. But this was the last trip that I took before the pandemic hit. And little did I know at that time that this was actually the last trip I was going to take where, for the most part, I was carefree, anxiety-free, able to walk a fair distance without help, except for the Manfrotto tripod, and without all the other symptoms that I now get. And this was the last trip for the most part I was actually healthy. When I returned home from America, I really wasn't very well. I just put it down to having done too much at the time. But I now believe that it was my very first official flare and crash. And these are terms that I now hate and dread both in equal measures. So after multiple hospital visits and GP appointments, I was told that the pain that I was in on a daily basis was due to endometriosis. And that's a condition that at the time, I'm actually really ashamed to admit that I hadn't even heard of. In fact, 1 in 10 people are affected by it globally, making it more common than diabetes. Yet it's hardly spoken about and it's greatly underfunded. So unfortunately, the only way to receive a formal diagnosis is to have an operation. There is no other way. That is the gold standard. So that's exactly what I did, which confirmed that I did have endometriosis and adhesions. And as you can see, I am looking completely out of it there because the nurse hadn't long dosed me up on some really strong painkillers as I'd just come out of surgery. However, I still wasn't very well after this operation, and it wasn't long before I received my second diagnosis. So ME, or myalgic encephalomyelitis, was my second incurable illness diagnosis. And I just want to highlight that although ME is often referred to as chronic fatigue syndrome, ME is so much more than just fatigue. It causes your whole body to almost shut down. And if anyone here has ME, or you know someone who lives with ME, then you will understand when I say that it feels as though you've been robbed of the life that you thought you were going to have. So one of the main factors of ME is something called post-exertional malaise. And these funky graphics kind of explain a fraction of what that can entail. So PEM can come after the simplest of tasks, ones that you were able to do before, and even without a single thought. So things like having a shower or walking the dog, even reading a book or just going on social media. So ME means that you have to plan ahead, hoping that the day that you want to do something or go to an event that you'll be okay. And then also factor in that you'll probably crash afterwards, potentially being bedbound for days or even weeks. So ME is a scalable illness, which means one day you could feel like a superhero, or in relative terms, and then the next feel like you're completely stuck in the mud and you can't move anywhere. And this makes it really, really hard to predict, not only for yourself who's suffering, but for everyone around you. So, although this photo actually looks quite funny, it kind of looks like I've melted into the bed. This was part of one of my crashes, and one of my worst crashes, actually. So my whole body felt as though there were lead weights just pushing me down, like physically pushing me down, making me unable to move. I didn't want to speak, I didn't want to do anything, and I was incredibly sensitive to noise and to light. And my worst crashes that I've experienced so far over the years have left me practically bedbound. Now, I won't go into any more detail about endometriosis or ME right now, but if anyone does want to ask me any questions or talk about it, then please do so after this presentation, and you can DM me on socials or email me, and I'll be happy to talk about it. So they say good things come in threes, and I'm not so sure about the good part, but the third thing to top everything off at the start of 2020 was, of course, the announcement of the pandemic. So, having just had the diagnosis of not one, but two incurable illnesses without knowing much about either or how they would completely change my life, and then facing this meant that I had to go and do my own research to try and understand what was ahead for me. So living with chronic illness is kind of like asking a magic 8 ball if you'll ever be how you used to be, and getting the response, outlook not so good, or don't count on it. After having gone from someone who absolutely loved exercise and being really active to spending most time at home was a huge shock to the system. And as the world started to get back to normal after the pandemic and the restrictions were lifted, it felt like my lockdown hadn't ended. And honestly, it still feels that way some days. So the only choice, and because I'm incredibly stubborn, is to live with it. So anyone in the chat who is living with chronic illness must have been asked this question at some point. Have you tried yoga? The short answer is yes, and the short reply is no. Unfortunately, it didn't cure me, but here's hoping. So in this next section, I want to talk through things that have helped me accept and to adapt. And it all started with changing my mentality toward my illnesses. So photography is incredibly powerful, as we all know. It can hold an audience captive without having to say a single word. It can change moods, create feelings, and speak to us with no language barrier because it's universal. So turning back to photography and using it as a positive tool was the only way forward. It was a way to reconnect. Now, a great way to immerse ourselves in all things photography, but from the comfort of our own home, is by joining online platforms or societies. Because in these, there is a community, and I know that especially during the pandemic, it gave me a sense of belonging. And they also actively have options to enter competitions, chat to others on forums, be able to watch online classes, and even be able to obtain qualifications. It's a great way to stay connected without any pressure. So I'm a member of a few different associations that are pictured here, and this has helped me to stay up to date with the industry, as well as inspire me for future photo shoots. So I regularly write down ideas and then I'll come back to them when I feel ready or when I'm able to. And we're so lucky to have access to an insane amount of free educational videos on YouTube, whether that's through B&H, things like Event Space, which I've loved watching over the years, or just searching photography in the search bar. And then it's a case of choosing what to watch and for how long you want to watch it for, because there are just so many. So the best part about photography is that you can do it anytime, anywhere. You don't need a fancy camera, you can use your phone. And as I started to get back into photography after my surgery, this is exactly where I started. So unfortunately, I have been housebound a lot over the past few years, and I had to go back to basics. I couldn't carry my big Canon camera or any other equipment, so I just took photos on my phone. And this gave me the opportunity to stop, pause, be present in the moment, and just appreciate the small things. And this is just straight out of the camera on my phone of some flowers, and I just love the simplicity of it and the colours. And then on days when I could get into my garden, I'd be resting in the sunshine when we had some, because the UK is notoriously grey. And this little daisy just caught my eye. And now it's not going to win any awards, I know that, but I just like the perspective of it. And in that moment, I was concentrating on that instead of my physical self, like any pain or how I felt. So it was something to kind of just reconnect with nature and take my mind away from things. So on my good days, I can venture a little bit further. I'm lucky that I live about 5 minutes from the beach. But again, I didn't have the energy to carry my equipment, so I've just been taking my phone with me. And this is an old iPhone. This isn't the fancy new iPhone or anything. But this has no filter, no adjustments. This is just what I witnessed and beauty in its natural form. Now, it can be difficult to stay positive when you are facing so much personally, but nature is a great healer. And whether you're a portrait photographer, sports, wedding, still life, newborn, or food photographer, you can't beat the inspiration that Mother Nature can give you. So any opportunity you have to be outside, just take it. Okay, so this is the hard part, still trying to pursue a passion when you're living with chronic illness. So this rather silly self-portrait was inspired by the film How to Get Ahead in Advertising, where the main character actually has a boil that grows into a head and it kind of starts taking over. It sounds ridiculous, but it's a great film. And that's kind of how I felt about chronic illness. It was like I was being told what I could and couldn't do. I knew I had to find ways to adapt, to still be able to pursue my love of photography, but without making my health worse. And that brings me on to what has been one of the most important areas, not only physically, but mentally, and that is adapting. So a lot of chronic illnesses, including M.E and endometriosis, are scalable, meaning that in one instance, you may need a mobility aid, like a wheelchair or walking stick, and other times you may be able to stand and walk unaided for periods of time. I was really lucky because I recently attended the British Photography Awards Gala in London as this fashion image was shortlisted. But in order to attend the event, I had to rest at home the week prior, travel to London the day before the event so that I could rest after the journey, because it's quite a long journey into London. And then instead of walking, I had to get taxis everywhere, which becomes quite expensive. And then sit down at every opportunity rather than stand. wear sunglasses everywhere to help with the light sensitivity, and because London is just overwhelming. And then unfortunately, I did have to leave the event early because I had to avoid pushing past and crashing. And it's a very fine line between like one moment you could be kind of okay, and then it just happens and you have to get back, you have to get home, and you have to rest, because it can mean the difference between a crash of, you know, maybe a couple of days or weeks. So in order to do this event, actually, I even had an IV health drip on the day to just help boost me. So there's a lot of preparation that went into this event just to get there. And I think a lot of people don't see that. And that's kind of why I wanted to share a bit of this in this talk today. So I used to be ashamed to ask for help. And I guess to look at myself as disabled. It's taken me a while to kind of come to terms with actually I do need help, and that help is important to my health to be able to, you know, to make sure that I don't crash. So every opportunity now I take as much help as I can wherever I am. So this is me in a kind of wheelchair trolley buggy thing. I don't know what you would call it. It was quite bizarre. It's like there's mobility aids, and obviously I'd wanted the help and everything to get around because it's quite a long walk where I was. And there was a man at the front who thought it was absolutely hilarious that it was kind of really funny to be pushed around together in kind of a wheelchair train thing. So we had a giggle about it. So that was the main thing. And it did help me, and it saved me a lot of energy. So planning ahead. For those of us who have chronic illness or any illness that can stop us being carefree, or that perhaps can make us more anxious about situations, planning, unfortunately, is key. As I mentioned before, I now have to plan extensively to ensure to the best that I can, whatever activity I do, whether that's a simple walk or a photo shoot or going to an event, or even a podcast or webinar such as this, that it doesn't cause me too much pain or cause a huge crash afterwards. So I have some fail-safes that I go through before doing any photo shoot or event to see if I am physically able to do the job and do it without causing me too much pain, and also to still be able to produce the best results. So I hope that some of these tips might be helpful for you. And we've got here time, creating a safe space, location, and rest. Now, rest is super important, and we'll get onto that in a moment. So in planning, I first need to decide how much time do I have to rest before the photo shoot or event, and this will depend on what the shoot will entail. Now, everything is still guesswork, but over the last few years, I have tried to work within my capabilities, so I don't push my boundaries for long periods of time. Also, what time of day has a huge effect on my symptoms. So early morning can be really difficult, as is any time after 8 p.m, because that's actually not far off of my bedtime these days. So when I have a photo shoot coming up, I will plan a number of things to help reduce the shoot time on the day. And this includes planning lighting and model poses in advance. I will use my good rest days to try and edit or to come up with lighting setups so that I can quickly set up on the day of the shoot and get the results faster. Now, this software, Satellite 3D by Elixir, helps me plan ahead without having to leave my sofa or bed or wherever I am. And you do have to pay for it, but I've started using it a fair bit because it's given me a chance to still be involved with the idea of photo shoots, but without having to actually do it and set everything up. So it's quite helpful. And I won't spend too long on this one, but this is inside the software, and you can kind of see that you can place the lights where you want with various modifiers and models, and then see what the outcome will look like. And you can add gels in there too, which is what I've done here. And it is quite cool. It's a cool bit of software. I like my gadgets. Now, this is a final image created in that software to give me a rough idea about how the final image may look. Now, Of course, it isn't going to be exact. Skin tones, the location where you shoot, you know, what the model looks like. There's so many different factors at play, but it does give you a good starting point for the feel of the photo shoot. So the next stage for me is to try out the lighting on a dummy, or a creepy doll head is what I call it, or Cassandra. Her name's Cassandra. I think you can just about make her out there in the green top. So I often kind of plan this all together the day before. So then the lights are already in place, and the only thing that needs to change is the model. And obviously a real life model is much preferred than just a creepy doll head called Cassandra. And this is the result from that shoot. So for this, I used 2 Profoto B10s either side of the model, each one with a different coloured gel. And then 1 Profoto B10 Plus in front of the model with a gridded reflector to direct the light to the model's face. And the background for this was just a deep red A1 piece of card, so super simple setup. And then here's one more from that shoot. And as you can see, the gels are much more subtle on the model than they are on the computer generated image, mainly because I wasn't shooting in a dark studio. So there's quite a lot of natural light coming in. And that brings me on to my next topic, creating a safe space. So I have learned that this is key. This is really, really important. There must be a place that you can go when things feel too much. And this is your safe space so that you can rest, recharge, feel relaxed. And in most cases, this will be your home. So in order to keep photographing through my illness, I decided that I had to create a safe space at home that can also be a studio space in order to keep doing what I love whilst I'm able to. So this used to be the dining room in our house. It is now the Safe Space studio. And I used to have an amazing, huge, big studio. I shared it with a few other people and everything was already set up. But honestly, it was just costing too much money and I didn't really need all of the space that it gave me, to be honest. So I downsized, and now this is where the majority of the magic happens, in the comfort of my own home. Now, not only does this make business sense because of all the overhead costs, but it means that I stay calm. I can take breaks where I need to. I can sit on my comfy sofa while the makeup artist and the hairstylists are busy working their magic on the models. It's my space, and therefore I can control certain elements. So all of this helps with my chronic illnesses. It's about adapting to make sure that it gives you the best chance to be able to do what you love. It might not be as glamorous, but you do get the results. And this image is from the setup that we just saw. So I think we can agree that seeing this image, you wouldn't have thought that it was just taken in a dining room with a small setup. It could have been taken in a studio. And again, this was a simple 2-light setup. So 1 Profoto B10 on a platypod for the background light, no modifier, and then 1 B10 in front of the model with a Pixapro Silver interior beauty dish, which happens to be my favorite modifier. I do love a beauty dish. And then, yeah, I just used some white foam board as a reflector just to bounce some light back in and to soften any shadows underneath her chin. And here's another example. So in this image on your left, I quite often set up my laptop so I can shoot tethered. And for those of you that don't know what tethered is, it just basically means you connect your laptop to your camera so that you can see the images straight away, everyone can see them, and it does make life a little bit easy, but sometimes it's a bit temperamental. So just bear that in mind if you do try it. But yeah, this means everyone can easily view the images, and we can correct things as we go, and the model can kind of look at the pose that she's doing. She can adjust how she's standing, so we get better images that way as well. So I actually find that shooting tethered, it actually reduces shoot time. Because everyone can kind of see what needs to be done quicker as opposed to kind of going through it and changing it. And this actually in turn helps with managing energy levels. So obviously if the shoot is a shorter amount of time, obviously that helps me. So making these small adjustments can really make the difference to needing 1 or 2 days rest afterwards, compared with needing like a whole week perhaps to recover from a shoot. So this rather glamorous image is my shed. And during the pandemic, we were told not to be indoors with others, especially if you're in the vulnerable category. And actually, if it's nice outside, why not use that as an opportunity to shoot in the fresh air? So here I've literally stuck an A1 white foam board to the shed using masking tape. It's not very neat, but it did the trick. And it was to create my makeshift backdrop because the light there was actually perfect. So this is all natural light, no strobes involved or anything. So yeah, even though things are kind of almost back to normal, if I do get the chance, I do like to shoot outside, even if it is in the garden against the shed. And actually quite a few images have been shot against that shed now, so it's quite famous. And this is on a recent shoot. I've just used the white foam board behind the model, or stuck on the masking tape there. And then basically just one in front. So the makeup artist is holding the other white foam board in front of our model just to bounce some light back in. And you can pick these boards up from Amazon or places like Hobby Lobby or Michael's, or for those in the UK, like Hobbycraft. Yeah, so they're lightweight, they're cheap, they're brilliant. I love them. And this is the result from that shoot. So it's really beautiful, soft, natural light. And this is no strobes, no heavy equipment, just a camera, that white foam board against that rather glamorous shed. And yeah, this is the result that you can get. And here's one more example with a bit more of a creative makeup look, but still using that natural light. So you can see that that glow from the sun is just hitting those white foam boards, and it's just illuminating the face of the makeup artist and the model there. And this is a result from that shoot. So not having to use any strobes for this meant that I didn't have to lift anything other than my camera, which also helps with any pain that I get. So it's just these little adjustments on days when you have low energy or a high pain that can make a huge difference. Now, obviously, I have had to cancel or change shoots when I've been really bad, but this leads us on to the next section. Location. So I do always try to shoot at home if I can, my safe space, or my safe space studio, or somewhere close to home if I don't get any help or assistance to get to that location, or a place that I visited many times so that I feel comfortable. So if you're familiar with a place, obviously you feel safe there. Of course, there are always exceptions on the brief, but in most cases, I have been able to kind of adapt to be able to set the location in my favor, and never be afraid to suggest places that you know well. Not only will it keep you calm, but if you know a place well, the chances are you'll know where all of the good photography spots are, and your client will be absolutely thrilled with them. So for this photo shoot, a singer wanted new images for her album and website that reflected her personality and the style of music. And in case you didn't guess, I think you just about make out her hat there. She loves country music and she sings country. So I suggested this location that was close to home and one that I photographed so many times before that I felt comfortable in, again, creating that safe space. And this shoot was only about an hour long, and it was just the two of us, so minimal energy and a really, really relaxed environment. And actually we were quite lucky with the weather too, because I think this was in winter. I only took my very portable and lightweight Profoto A10 and the Click Softbox Octa, so everything folded down into one bag, and it was super lightweight to carry. And we gave the images a kind of Western vibe filter after, which kind of fit in with the brief, but this is one of those images. And this one is, I really like this picture. Here, the Profoto A10 was just off camera right, just to add some light back into her face, but we're balancing there the natural ambient light with the flash. And then this one is probably my favorite from that shoot. So she was super happy to kind of get in the foliage there. So it's so great when you have someone who's happy to just do anything for the shots. You know, she got right in there. We put the guitar there. her hat right in front of her. And then because it was close to sunset, the light was beautiful anyway. But we just got the Profoto A10 just off the side there to kind of just kick in a little bit more onto her face. And yeah, I love this picture, and she was really happy with it too. So lastly, nothing is more important than rest. And I don't just mean before or after the shoot or event. Pacing, as it's known in M.E terms, is all about managing energy during something, not just before and after. So I try to book in regular rest time or regular breaks, just as you would working a 9 to 5. I ensure to sit down or take a moment to myself at any opportunity during a photo shoot. So every minute of rest counts, and it really can mean the difference between having to rest for a day or two or potentially being bedbound. So you have to get amazing at resting anywhere, anytime you can, in order to save energy. And here's me doing just that. If I have to travel at all, there's a lot of preparation that goes into this. I will wear a face mask, an eye mask, earplugs to block out as much noise and light as I can, as this has a huge impact on me over long durations. I've learned to manage this a lot better, and although I may look ridiculous in that photo on the right, it means that I use less energy. And also for things like this tonight, for this webinar, I've literally just used, I've got some light sensitivity today, so for my lighting on me today, I'm literally just using some fairy lights, some Christmas fairy lights to light this up. So I hope you guys can see all right and everything. Okay, branching out. So very unexpectedly, since being unwell, I have had new opportunities that I never thought I'd have. And this is all part of the section of branching out in the industry. So this is a product review video that I created for Profoto Click Octa Softbox. And you can watch the video on my YouTube channel if you'd like to see some behind the scenes. I adapted by choosing a location that was close to me and one that I knew well. So I was creating my safe space, it's very familiar to me. So I felt happy and relaxed there. I also had to modify my kit as well because I obviously couldn't carry an awful lot. So again, making it extra portable, I had that the Profoto A10, really lightweight, or a speed light, and the foldable softbox as well. So we can still get that really amazing studio quality light, but without all of the equipment that comes with it. The other thing I had to make sure of is adjusting the amount of hours that I was on location for, because it was also pretty cold. This was it wasn't a warm day at all. I'm surprised we had any sun at all. And the cold really does take it out of me, as does the extreme heat. So I had to make sure that we could try and get everything we could in just a couple of hours. And then on location, allowing those kind of rest breaks. So when the makeup artist is kind of touching up, just basically sit down, take a moment, have a cup of tea, have something to eat, make sure that all of those things are factored in. And then afterwards, to actually create the video, I had to give myself a lot longer to edit it than my healthy self would have done, because obviously I had to allow for the rest time in between, because editing on a computer also takes it out. But I completed it in the end. So, and it's all about trying something new. Give it a go, and you never know where it will lead. And those of us with chronic illness, we won't be able to compete with others who can put content up each week. And although this can be disheartening, we have to remember that it's unfair to kind of battle and push ourselves to kind of, compete with that. You have to be kind to yourself, and your health comes first. And this is one of the final images from that shoot. I love this picture. And we just use one Profoto A10 light here, which is like a small speed light, and the foldable softbox. And this kit was so lightweight to carry, and it made the whole shoot possible. Getting published. So most of us photographers, we have images sat on our hard drives, hundreds, if not thousands. on multiple hard drives. So why not send them off to get published? Write to magazines to ask if they're looking for anything in particular, or better yet, send them an example of your work. And also send them a short description. Now, don't send too many photographs or files that are too large. A contact sheet of images is normally preferred, or your email may not get opened. So I've learned that one the hard way. So just send some off, say what you can do, send some examples to relevant magazines, and just see what happens, because the worst they can say is no. And just don't be scared to send it off. This image was basically for a front cover, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to get it or not, and it kind of surprised me one day, and I thought, well, brilliant, you know, I didn't know whether I should send that off and everything. So it just goes to show that if you don't try, you don't get. So just be confident, take your work out there and just see what happens. And also, if you're able to write, pitch ideas to editors about features or columns, yeah, say again, you don't know what you're going to get back, so it's worth just writing to all different editors, different magazines, and seeing what they say. So personal projects. Now this is a great way to find new opportunities and to test skills and to work on something at your own pace. So I went onto Facebook, and I don't know if most people still use Facebook for this, to see what people in my area were doing in terms of activities and things that could be linked to improving both physical and mental health. And this was both areas that I was struggling with. And I found that cold water swimming was actually really popular. And because of a lot of the leisure centres were closed during COVID, people were doing home workouts, but those that really enjoyed swimming had to go sea swimming. So I took the plunge, excuse the pun. So this was the initial message that I put out. I don't know if you can see it there, to see if anyone was interested. And it started out as more of a mental health project, mainly because I was still very much in denial on coming to terms with my own diagnosis. And in hindsight, it was the worst time of the year to start. This was end of January, but this was my only connection to the outside world and a project that I could manage. And you can see here that I'm wearing my huge dry robe to keep warm and have my Pro Photo light set up, which was super quick to set up and to pack down. So most of the people I met for this project said that not only did it help with their mental health, but it helped with their physical ailments too. And for this project, I contacted swimmers as and when I was having a good day. And by that, I mean actually physically able to leave the house and physically able to drive and physically able to photograph. And I would go and take their portraits. Now, sometimes it was just one person, others it was a group, and obviously all remaining socially distanced, of course. But this was my setup. So I had to recreate the exact lighting each time, which was actually really tough. For starters, I didn't have an assistant because of lockdown restrictions. So I had to make sure that I secured the light stands properly as it was windy. And you can kind of, I forgot my sandbag several times, and I literally had to use stones and people's bags and everything. It was just chaos. And as you can see, I kind of made a triangle shape with the lighting. You kind of see it in their glasses here. I wanted this lighting set up to create some really cool catch lights in their eyes, but to also get a lot of light on their faces as opposed to lighting further down their body. And this is a little time lapse. I don't know if it's going to play. So this is me just setting up to get ready for the swimmers so they didn't get too cold. And you can see the process of setting up and me trying to see whether the lights were in the right place. And this is on location at another couple of beaches close to where I live. So this is all within kind of probably 10-15 minute drive from my house. So again, keeping it close so I can always get back home if I need to. And there were so many challenges with this project. So sand is an issue. It just gets everywhere, but it's great to secure your stand legs in. So that was a positive for that. But it was so hard to get the right lighting height because everyone was a different height. and I didn't have a lot of time in between to adjust for each swimmer. So otherwise I'd get really cold. So obviously coming straight out of the sea of God knows what temperature it was, freezing. So it was all about speed and everything to try and get those pictures in. So I did the best I could with that. And this is another quick behind the scenes of how I was setting up. Now I went everywhere in my dry robe. So I actually had a coat on underneath this and then this because it was that cold. And it's blue skies, but don't let that fool you. It's winter. It was a cold, crisp winter day. But yeah, this is basically just setting up, taking the pictures, and obviously I'm in the way there. But so yeah, most of my work is normally in a studio setting or say my safe space at home. So I've worked on location before, but with things like fashion. So and that's normally with agency models or people who are used to being in front of the camera. So when I started this project, obviously the lighting was the first issue that I had to try and keep it the same for everyone. But the second thing is that people weren't used to being in front of the camera, and I had probably less than a minute to try and get a shot of people from, coming out of the water. So as a photographer, you have to try and ease someone into that. And especially if you're not feeling great either, you have to really fake it and use that energy to kind of make them feel more comfortable. And so I really love this picture. She's a very smiley lady. But yeah, I literally had less than probably a minute to be able to capture that facial expression after they had just been swimming. And it was kind of about getting that raw emotion after just having been exposed to those cold temperatures. And I also had the pleasure of photographing the oldest cold water swimmer on the island where I live too. I won't reveal her age, but she was brilliant. And although she was a little bit shy at first, she kept coming back every time I kind of went to go and set up. She's like, "Oh, do you want another picture?" So I've got a few, but this one's my favourite. So I learned so much by doing this personal project, and I learned that trying to keep the same lighting on location when it's different beach locations for people that are different heights is way more challenging than I gave it credit for. And then having to shoot at different times of day due to tide times meant that any sun and shadows weren't consistent due to the angle of where the sun was. And then, of course, taking into consideration the weather too, so very windy. And I didn't have an assistant, and obviously being unwell too. So there's quite a lot of factors kind of working against you. But this is my favourite image. And although it's of someone I had practically just met, it represents everything that I'm feeling. And I'm connected to this image in more ways than I ever could have imagined. And it all started with a choice of reaching out to others when I was struggling myself. So being home and having bad days, and there's quite a few, can actually mean the opportunity of going back through old hard drives to see what images you can use for stock agencies. So obviously we went through potentially getting published. That's one avenue. Now, stock images is a completely different area, which can be quite lucrative. Now, I'm sure obviously most of us have tons of images sat on our hard drives, hidden away from the light of day, but these images can make you money. So if you photograph people, you have to make sure that you get a model release form and upload that with your submission to the stock agency. And that is really, really important. But I believe Adobe, you can do a digital one. So you can actually get the photograph or do it digitally online, send it to the email of the model, and it gets all done electronically that way. So you don't have to worry about getting papers signed and everything. It's also a great idea to look at what the current briefs are for stock agencies to see what they're looking for. So obviously Christmas time, Valentine's Day, Easter, all those sorts of things. It's worth kind of looking ahead and seeing what you might be able to shoot for. And actually kind of, you can potentially shoot some things at home for stock images too. So that's a good way to kind of stay doing photography and get your images out there. So if you don't fancy being on video, but you like to talk, how about trying a podcast? And if not your own, how about being a guest on one? So earlier this year, I was asked to join in on a photography podcast with 9 other hosts from around the world. And each week, a couple of us would chat about anything and everything to do with photography. Now, I had no idea if I'd be any good at the time, but I jumped at the chance because it was a new experience and something that I could do from home. And this is something I never thought I would get involved with, but it's actually opened up a few other doors too. And this is actually just a quick screenshot from one of the podcast episodes. And this is me and one of the other hosts, Kathy, obviously having a little bit too much fun there. But the reason I said yes to doing the podcast was because I felt as though I had lost my connection to the outside world and to the photography community. And mainly because I had to stay in the house. I was in the house more. So by doing this podcast, it allowed me to be in my safe space while still connecting with other photographers and being able to talk and share, all things photography, which of course is what we love to do. And here's a couple of behind the scenes of some of the setups that I've been using for the podcast recording. I'd love to say that it's still that tidy, but it's not. So I get to sit down and it's all pre-recorded, so there's not a lot of pressure there. And if you haven't tried podcasting, I do highly recommend it. And it doesn't have to be about photography. It's a great avenue to get yourself out there and try new things, and also to pick up new skills too. So it's something in there for everyone. Okay, so podcasting snowboard into teaching. So another thing I didn't expect this year was to be teaching photography on various platforms. And I was so excited to be chosen as an instructor for online learning platform, Kelby One Photoshop World. Now, you may recognise a few faces in here because I think a fair few of them have been on B&H Event Space too. So the fact that Photoshop World was online this year, it meant that I could be in my safe space and kind of be online and teach and answer questions that, from the comfort of my own home. It was a great experience, but I do hope that I'll be able to teach again at Photoshop World, but fingers crossed in person next time. And my class for that was all about getting started in beauty photography. And it's still up on there if you want to go and have a look. And here's behind the scenes of my setup for that class. Now, I had to cover the window, which is on the right out of the view here, with black bin bags to get rid of any natural light, because it was actually summer at that point. And as I was recording, it would have got darker and affected the light and everything. So there's a lot of learning there. There's a lot of learning process to go through and new skills picking up. So again, not amazingly glamorous, other than maybe that pink cushion. And then finally, in-person talks at shows. So this year I was able to speak at the photography show at the NEC Birmingham. Again, all about living with chronic illness as a photographer. I had such a wonderful response from people that were there, and I'm so grateful to everyone who made the journey physically to be there to listen to my talk. I saw some old friends who I hadn't seen for years and made new friends, some of them in this picture who I'm really thankful for. Now, I was there for the whole 4 days because I had to, again, get there and rest and manage my energy. And I took regular breaks, naps, early nights, and I kept my earplugs handy for the noise sensitivity and my sunglasses just in case I felt overwhelmed. Now, this was the first big event that I had been to since my diagnosis, and I was so nervous, so nervous about it. But I managed my energy really well. And although I did have to miss out on quite a few social events, which I wasn't too happy about, I was just so thankful that I was even able to be there. So that was a big moment for me this year. Which leads me on to some really, really exciting news. I will be speaking at WPPI in March. I've already planned my rest and recovery either side of my talk at WPPI, and I'll be taking my mobility aid with me to help me through. And this will be my biggest test to date, but I love Vegas and I can't wait to see all of my American friends and to meet lots of new photographers too. So my talk is on the Tuesday and is called All You Need Is Light, and we'll cover everything you need to get started in transitioning from natural light to strobes and flash. And if anyone is going, just send me a message on my contact page on my website, and I can send you across a promo code, and it gets you, I think, $40 off a conference pass. Recap. Okay, so I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining this webinar today, or to those who are listening on demand. I'm just going to recap through all of the points that may help and inspire moving forward, and then we'll be finishing up after with any questions that you may have. So branching out. So when you're able to try new things, you never know where they will lead, and you may find new hobbies and new friends. And this is actually why I love the photography community, because you meet so many wonderful people, and more often not than, you do become friends. So in branching out, we touched upon things like podcasting, stock photography, YouTube channels, getting published, and social media, and even trying different genres of photography if you want to try things at home that you haven't done before. And then there's also things like writing and like blogging, for instance, and all of these avenues can generate new skills and potentially income too. Plan. So planning had a few things to consider, such as time, location, and rest. Try to keep photo shoot durations to a minimum, whether that's in a studio, at home, or out on location. And photograph in a place or location that you know well, and ensure that you take regular breaks whenever you can. And all of these little things will make a difference to how much energy you use throughout the day. So as we said before, creating a safe space is so important. And if you're out and about, creating as much of a safe environment as you can. It's all about reducing anxiety by finding out things like how close you can park. Are there facilities? Is there food and drink available? Will it be busy? Are there quiet areas? Is there access or the option for mobility assistance? Now, I kind of get a bit overwhelmed sometimes of all of the things I need to think about now before I even leave the house, where I didn't think about any of these things before. So it can be overwhelming at first, but they're quite good things to kind of get into practice so that when you get to somewhere, get to your destination, you feel a bit more relaxed. So depending on your own personal needs, say it's a good idea to try and find out as much as possible, or having someone find out for you, friend, family. This means that you'll have the best experience when you actually get there. So I do take my earplugs with me wherever I go, and my sunglasses, because I do get both noise and light sensitivity. And I've had some comments about when I wear sunglasses indoors, but hey, if it's good enough for celebrities, it's good enough for me. And you just have to do what's best for you. This is a tough one. Know your limits. When anyone is unwell, they are told to rest. Now, obviously, this can be difficult when you have a chronic illness, but after a while, you will know what your maximum limit is per day. And obviously, you don't want to be hitting that limit every day. You don't want to be doing it. Please don't push past your limits. Find ways to kind of work within those limits. Or if you do push past, make sure you have a contingency plan in place to rest and recover. So if you know that something is particularly going to take, just that little bit more energy, say, okay, well, the next 2 days, I'm going to just rest completely and do nothing. And your health comes first always. And I know this can be difficult, but it's true. It's a very, very, very true. Health comes first. Okay, so personal projects. It doesn't have to be going out and actually photographing. It could be looking back through old images and cataloguing, or re-editing images, listening to online photography talks on platforms like B&H, getting some ideas to do in the future. Or you can even play around on new software, which is what I've done here, using Skylam's Luminar. I kind of edited her to try and look like Catwoman, something a bit different for me, but I kind of thought it was quite good. But personal projects are all about you. And the best part is there are no time constraints. So find something you're passionate about and create when you're able to. So the last one I want to leave you with, but it's the most important one, is don't compare. And it's a difficult one. The world is a tough place and the industry isn't much kinder sometimes, but as they say, compare leads to despair. There is enough space for all of us in this industry, and there are opportunities, and even sometimes when and where you least expect them. And without sounding too corny, be true to who you are and follow your own path, because your journey is your own. Okay, one more. Don't give up. You may not be able to do all of the things that you could do before, and it takes time to accept that. But once you do, and you start focusing on the little things that you can do, you do begin to find happiness again. And it's not easy. I'm not saying it is, but it's all about adapting, like we kind of mentioned. This image of me almost 4 years ago reminds me that the journey I have been on wasn't the one that I planned, but it has brought me to where I am now, on this very, very different road. Some days are harder than others, but I have to remain grateful for what I'm still able to do and remember to be kind to myself. And for those of you who are living with a chronic illness or condition, I hope that you remember to be kind to yourself too, and don't give up, and reach out if you need support, because you're not alone in this. And that brings us to questions. So, hello, Scott, are you still there?
I'm still here. I am still here. Yes.
Okay.
So
How are you?
first, I'm great. I'm great. First, I want to thank you. I mean, that's amazing. That's excellent. Like I said in the beginning, I mean, thank you for coming on and sharing with us. I've been kind of checking out on the background, seeing what people are talking about and stuff, and the response has been amazing. So everybody who tuned in, thank you very much to them also. Tons of comments just thanking you for sharing and for coming in and being open and talking about it, creating a dialogue, which I think is super important. And, we've talked about this in the past. We've talked about the event space being sort of a beacon for education, but it extends past just how to take better photographs, how to be a better videographer, or any of the, categories that we work on, but diving into things like this, like chronic illness, things that are issues for people every day, that when you look at a photograph, you don't see, you don't get that.
No.
You don't know that, if I just passed you in the street, walking by, nobody knows that Sean Elizabeth may be walking around with a chronic illness, or Scott Jolson is, dealing with whatever craziness he may have. But but I think it's great and so important. And so, just really genuinely want to thank you for doing that, because it really is important. And I'm glad that we can provide a space for people to come and listen and learn on a greater scale, besides just the scale that we already have. One thing I did want to talk about, and I did want to ask you, because I don't think we touched on it a whole bit, is something that you've kind of alluded to, and you sort of hit on it towards the end about, not giving up. But, being diagnosed with not just, like you said, not just one illness, but two at the same time, is obviously coming from a lifestyle that you were living where you were healthy and exercising regularly. I'm sure that comes as a shock, as it would for anybody. And obviously, like you said, there are good days, there are bad days, but what have you found to really help you in dealing with that, in realizing, this is another road, it's another day on the road, let's continue to go, and let's continue to cross that bridge and keep going, because I'm sure at times it is difficult to deal with.
Yeah, no, it's so difficult. I mean, honestly, I think that the bad days, I know that the bad days are temporary, and I have to kind of hold on to that. Some of my worst crashes have been, kind of over a week, where I've been bedbound, and it's hard mentally. So I know it's hard physically, but that is hard mentally to get your head around, to think that your body is giving up on you, it's not working, and why isn't it working? And there's not a lot of answers. So I think the stubborn part in me, I want to know answers, and I want to know why my body's like this, and in some ways that's helped me. And actually, when I started the personal project, like obviously my mental health was struggling with all of this, and I reached out to say the cold water swimmers because I heard that it might be good for mental health. And when I met these people and heard what they were going through, I guess it sounds a bit bad when you say it out loud, but it was almost quite comforting to know that I'm not the only person going through things, but we just don't talk about it enough. And I think actually doing that project and then reaching out to people when I was really struggling gave me that little bit of hope in a way that, you know, actually more people are going through things than we realize, but you know, we just need to talk about it more, and having that connection and keeping that connection is really important. And you know, the reason I went through all of that was because of photography. So I think photography, in a way, obviously I couldn't do it to the extent that I could before, but I found ways to adapt and to make sure I can still try and do things while I can. So it's kind of almost given me back a lifeline that I perhaps lost at the beginning when I got my diagnosis.
Great. So I do want to say Michael commented here in Zoom and said thank you very much for sharing. Really appreciative of it, and brought up a point that it's going to rewatch this again. So I did want to let everybody know that if you are interested in rewatching this, please feel free to. Obviously, that's what we're here for. And obviously, you can watch any of our events. So this one, along with any of them, they're all posted. If you go to vimeo.com/BH Event Space, you can watch them there, or you can go to our Facebook page, BH Event Space. So a little bit of shameless plugging, but for those who do want to rewatch it and do want to dive into it, or have watched something in the past that maybe you've missed something, you always can rewatch any of our content. It's there. That's what we're here to do. But I don't want to take any more of your time. I'm sure that this was already very, very long for you, and I do really appreciate it. And so I want to give you some time to sort of decompress and relax, get some of that rest. I'm gonna join you. I think I'm gonna kick my feet up for a couple of minutes before our next event.
Yeah, absolutely.
and get ready for it. But thank you so much again. We really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. I know there was a ton of people who just had tons of positive feedback, and we're thanking you on all of our channels. So we really do owe a sense of gratitude for you coming on here and speaking about something that we don't get to talk about all the time. So
yeah, well, thank you once again for having me on. And as I mentioned before, if anyone does want to reach out and speak to me about any of the conditions or chronic illness just as a whole, definitely, you know, send me an email, and I'll respond as soon as I can.
Excellent. Well, that's all the time we have for now. This has been another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. We'll catch you next time.
Okay, take care.